Hello and welcome to Psalm Sense. I'm your host, Rachel K. Ing. This is a podcast where we discuss all things olfactive, especially perfume, sometimes wine. And today our guest is the one and only, the great Viranis Ridari, also known as Derek and Scented Devil in many of our fragrance communities. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the term barbershop and what a barbershop fragrance is. I have been spending some time lately getting to know some of the younger generations output, coming up into the fragrance communities, those youngsters in their 20s who are starting to make fragrance content across TikTok, YouTube, etc. And I've been watching especially some younger ladies who are making some wonderful fragrance content. And one thing that I noticed is the use of the term barbershop. This fragrance, this is a barbershop fragrance. This fragrance has barbershop, is a barbershop, a vanilla barbershop. And I have been curious about this kind of use of language because it seems to me sometimes that the fragrances they're describing may not be actually technically barbershop fragrances, and what they're using that term to describe notes and fragrances that are camphoraceous, right? Or even anisic, things of that quality. So I'm so excited to have Derek here to talk about the history of barbershop fragrances, what that term means, and to figure out if we're using it right.
Hi. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to clear my throat on camera, but I kind of had to.
No worries.
Yeah. So the thing about the term barbershop is, I feel like and this is just my personal opinion, I feel like maybe a lot of younger people are using the term barbershop in a pejorative manner, in the same way people say "okay, boomer" and stuff like that, because barbershop, the concept of going to a barbershop using barber products, is sort of conflated with antiquity. With he's doing the barbershop thing. It's the old timey, red, white, blue pole stripe kind of deal. So I'm not saying that everyone who's doing this on the internet is doing this for this reason. I'm just saying a lot of these, this is barbershop, could be dismissive in nature. But the thing that they're missing, the context, is that there isn't a single unifying definition for barbershop, because the fragrances and products used in actual barbershops vary wildly by region, culture, country, things of that nature. So what we consider a barbershop in the United States, for instance, is wildly different from what's considered barbershop in, say, Italy, Spain, UK, so Germany. And, that's a little bit lost sometimes, I feel like, with the people slinging the word around, right? So
Definitely. And that's something that I noticed, is that when people are using this term descriptively, yeah, there's really not a lot of consistency. Exactly. And so that's why I'm curious to get your take on, especially because it's more common in the men's side. And I've recently been, and this is what is kind of new and interesting to me, is I've heard some younger, and I don't want to call anyone out, because again, this is, I don't think there's like you were saying, there may not be a right or a wrong, and language is always fluid, of course, but I've seen especially some younger, wonderful women on like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram using the term to describe, just all kinds of things, but about mostly female oriented or female marketed fragrances. Of course, there's no gender in fragrance, but I was like, oh, well, that's unusual. I've always associated this term with classically described or classically oriented towards male fragrances.
Well, they might in part be doing that when they say this profile is barbershop. They might also be sort of coding it by saying, oh, this is a little too masculine for me, because the anise, the green notes, things that are typically associated with a men's fragrance. So if they're picking up a camphoraceous note, or they're picking up menthol, they're going, okay, this is barbershop. In other words, they're trying to say this is too manly for me. It's not feminine enough. Doesn't follow the stereotype of what my, socially accepted definition of feminine versus masculine, which opens up the whole gender can of worms once again, and we're not going to do that here. But you know, part of that could be that insinuation as well, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. So do you have, Derek, do you have a good idea of historically, like in the perfume community, like why things were called barbershop? Was it literally just perfume products used in barbershops? Is it that simple?
Pretty much, it's what was at hand, and associations with cleanliness and structure and preparedness. And without
Mm.
making a long, it's going to take a little while for me to unravel this, but without making like a 2 hour long, Stanley Kubrick film out of this, uh, the best way to say this, like the Cliff Notes version, if you will, is that um, barbers themselves were typically not something glamorous, not something that you did. You didn't go to a barber to get done up because for the longest time, especially in like Middle Ages up through to the Renaissance era, men typically kept long hair because it was expensive to get your hair cut. So you couldn't afford to get it cut, so you let it grow out. So typically you'd have all the peasantry with long beards and long hair, and all of the royals and nobles with the clean shaven face and the styled hair because they're the only ones that can afford any kind of grooming at all, effectively. But then that shifted into the 19th century, which started in the 18th, but it really took over in the 19th because in the 18th we had the macaroni with the powdered wigs and the puffy shirts and stuff. But then that gave way to the dandy in the 19th century. We're still talking aristocracy, though. Common man did not dress as a macaroni, nor did the common man dress as a dandy either. That wouldn't be until the Industrial Revolution happened, where it could be afforded, manufacturing and stuff. But the original idea of the dandy was, well, we keep our face bare, or maybe some decorated facial hair, some sideburns, some mutton chops, what have you. We have our hair shorn, and then we wear more like custom tailored clothes that are more structured, typically borrowing from military uniforms, so sloped shoulders, button up frocks, and then morning coats, and eventually sport coats down the road, hats and what have you not. So suddenly the barber was kind of more socially like democratized, right?
Mm.
So you had colleges for barbers, people learning to become barbers, learning how to shave with a straight razor, learning how to cut the hair, da 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 da. So then eventually, these barbers were looking for functional products to use in their establishments, typically for things like after a shave, throw something alcohol based or witch hazel based on the skin to close the pores and prevent infection, put some kind of hair tonic in the hair to give it weight and body so it's stylable, usually Macassar oil or quinine oil or something along those lines. You know, the smell was almost secondary, but whatever smell was there, whatever smell was present because happenstance, became associated with the barbershop using that product. So
Mm.
in a lot of European regions, it was the neroli smell of 4711, which wasn't really made to be an aftershave, but hey, it's like 80% alcohol, so it works. Slap it on the face, it closes the pores, stings like hell, but the smell of that, and then Macassar has a smell, quinine has a smell, et cetera, et cetera. All these things become tied to the barbershop smell. And then, of course, America has its own, which I can get into in a bit. UK has its own. Italy has its own. Spain has its own. And that's really the birth of the barbershop smell is whatever these functional products were, a lot of them predating the barbershop itself. Walking into a place and coming out smelling like whatever those products smelled like became smelling like barbershop.
Mm. That's so fascinating. And it kind of reminds me of one of our previous conversations about the idea of smelling clean, of fragrance equaling health and well-being and wellness. And so those clean scents. And when I think of a barbershop, it's all different associations that come to mind, including, soapiness and soap. And I wonder, like, because there's a whole new modern generation of clean fragrances, right? That some people associate with musky Some people associate with laundry smells. Some people associate with bright citruses and things that might be in that more traditional realm of barbershops, right? Like the citruses, the astringency, the astringent herbs, especially the camphoraceousness. That's more like, you know, a 4711, for example. It's so interesting to see how it changes over time, and like you said, with culture too. And I think of even like shaving foam, you know, like the way that shaving foams are scented in America, for sure. Like that kind of instantly comes to mind.
Yeah. So what's really funny about the sense of what's clean and what's dirty then versus now is a lot of reasons why a lot of really old products smell more animalic. People these days smell them and go, "Oh, that smells so dirty," or "It smells so sexual," or whatever they have to say. But they don't realize that in those days, the animal musks were in those perfumes not because they wanted to smell sexy or raunchy or what have you. They didn't have synthetic musks. I think nitro musks were new kids on the block in the late 19th century. So they were still expensive. It was easier to go squeeze on some poor cat's gland and get the goop out of the cat than it was to go find some nitro musks. So civet and castoreum were still highly in use because they did the job. They anchored the fragrance to the skin. Caswell Macy or Massey, I don't know which. Caswell Massey, I'll say. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But formula number 6 is effectively a narrowly styled cologne fragrance with a big wallop of civet so that it extends the cologne into a more long, proper wear. And people smell that and they're like, well, it's like musky Fruit Loops. It's so bizarre. And it's because, well, in America in the 1700s, they didn't have linalool, and they didn't have galaxoline, they didn't have all these other things that can give you that musk profile but keep it clean. They had to compromise, and they had to use the civet, the castoreum, the heraceium, the tonkin from the deer. Like that, there wasn't a choice.
Yeah,
So the perfumer then had to mask that muskiness as best they could, and they would use the tonka and rose and other things to try and sort of dogpile up over the animal notes to push it down. Like Jiki is a great example of that. There's so much on top of Jiki. You know, it's almost like an Eiffel Tower. The base is like this, and the top goes like that. And it's all about Amy Guerlain trying to hide the civet with everything else. So I mean, those were
absolutely.
clean fragrances back then. They smelled clean to the noses of that time period.
Absolutely. And we must also remember that the physical lived world and experience back in those days was so different. Like I've read a few descriptions of, for example, of Paris in like the 1700s, of places in the towns and cities in the 1600s. They didn't have sewer systems, right? The stink was tremendous. Or if you lived on a farm, the stink was actually probably smells better if you lived on a farm, but especially in cities, the stink was tremendous. They didn't have morgues, you know, the bodies were left on the streets to rot for
Duration.
animals to eat. I mean, like, so I wonder if even those musks that they were trying to hide maybe even smelled clean compared to a lot of the smells that people had to live in and around. And like there's this great description of the smells of Paris in like that led to the such a raging perfume industry in Paris in the 1700s, because if you were just a normal citizen walking through the streets of Paris, you were just assaulted with all these horrendous stenches and stinks. And there was so much disease, and it was just so hard to be alive in the city because of all the decay and stench and trash and toxic waste and body fluid that 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 the perfume industry just became huge, right?
Yeah.
There's a tremendous description of this in a book I read recently that I'll drop in the notes. So we definitely need to remember that the world we're walking around in right now with all of its cleanliness is very new.
Very sterile compared to how it was 300 years ago. And so then all this informs sort of the development of barbershop products too, because uh, barbershop products in regions where that was a bigger problem, you know, they are muskier, they are heavier on tonka, heavier on vanilla. You know, they do smell richer, more creamy as it were, because of the muscle profile, because that would make you smell clean compared to the raw sewage going down the street next to you after you exited the barbershop. Now, like, I feel like a lot of the reason why people associate the American barbershop style as the definitive one, which sounds a bit exceptionist in my mind. I don't like people saying that America has like the barbershop smell, but I think some of that just has to do with the fact that America culturally is much bigger on stereotypes and typing things. So the problem with America is when we find something that works, it becomes almost a unilateral thing. So the very specific American barbershop smell is really just a handful of commercially made products that were popular in the American barbershops because there wasn't competition. America back then being a little bit smaller than it is now, you didn't have 6,000 different brands. So the brand that got accepted that became the smell, it's like the Walmart situation, the only game in town. So a lot of the American aftershaves, the Skin Bracer, the Clubman Pinot, they all had this scent profile that was effectively adapted from French fragrances. Clubman, Skin Bracer, they're all fougères, and they're all adapted from products like Caron Pour un Homme or Fougère Royale or Jicky or Mouchoir de Monsieur, and those are all rounded, muskier profiles too. So that stuff kind of came over to the U.S. and then got adapted down market into the Skin Bracer, into the Clubman, and then every mom and pop barbershop across the nation adopted those products. So that's how that specific Play-Doh-y kind of vanillic fougere smell. Barbasol shave cream also co-opted that same smell because it was easy. It was there. They knew people liked it. We don't like to take risks here in America, do we, with our products? So it's not so much that Americans love that smell. It's just, well, you go to a little small town general store for some aftershave and it's only Clubman or Skin Bracer or Aqua Velva. That's it. Take your pick. It's A, B, and C, and they all smell relatively the same. It wasn't like you had a choice, You had Coke, and Coke with that.
Yeah,
So.
no, that's absolutely fascinating, especially, how the industries develop, and that definitely affects people's lived experience and products. And I think kind of I had two thoughts. One is that it is, and I'm learning, especially over here living in Asia, that the scent of clean is so culturally specific. The scent of clean can be incense. The scent of clean can be rose water. The scent of clean can be many, many, many things. And it's not necessarily, what you're describing, this very American scent profile and kind of combination of notes. And then the other thing that I was thinking or wondering as you were speaking was, I wonder if some of those more camphoraceous notes, some of those more biting herbal aspects of barbershop, I wonder if that comes from do you think there was some kind of pre-scientific medicinal uses for keeping the skin clean? Like you mentioned something about wanting to keep your pores closed and not having infections during the actual shaving experience. I wonder if some of that was some kind of herbal type remedies or maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, actually, witch hazel. Witch hazel is tremendously good for drying out the skin and closing the pores. Clary sage will do that too. A lot of other herbs will do that. Obviously, things like camphor and menthol numb the skin. They are topical analgesics, so they also help with that. They help take away the razor burn from a shave. And you find more of that stressed in, I want to say, Italian and Spanish barbershop products than you do American. I mean, American Skin Bracer has menthol a little bit. Aqua Velva very clearly has menthol, but the menthol is kind of the top note with those, right? It goes away after a few minutes, and you're left with the rest of the scent, which Aqua Velva, once you get past menthol, is like a brown shoe leather. Once you get past the menthol with Skin Bracer, it's basically poor man's Fougère Royale. And then, in Italy and Spain and regions south near the Mediterranean where you're closer to the equator, it's warmer. So they like the bracing, sharp, herbal, citric things preferred because it's hot. And those kind of smells carry better in hot weather. They smell cleaner longer. When you've got 90-degree outside and it's high humidity and you're walking along some coastal region in like Bergamo or something, or you're in Calabria or whatever, you don't want to smell like vanilla and civet. You don't. So that's why stuff like Aqua de Selva is very heavy on pine and bergamot and dry, very naked bare lavender. It's not lavender that hasn't been built up with anything else like geranium and no vanilla. And then there's also Pinot Silvestre, which basically smells like a straight up pine tree. You know, Spain, they were Marugia did a lot of things. You know, a lot of cologne takes. There's Aqua de Colonia by Aqua de Parma, also very. You know, you get where I'm going with that. A very popular product in Italy actually is called Proraso, and the original green Proraso. They've got many flavors now, but the original green Proraso was eucalyptus and menthol mixed together, which is very, very bracing. And the shave soap smells like eucalyptus, menthol, and rosewood. The actual shave soap does. And then the accompanying aftershave and some of the other products also play around with that eucalyptus menthol profile. And it's about as green as fresh as you can get. I mean, it's basically hitting you with a tree branch like this. So that's how they roll down there, though.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So, Derek, may I ask you, what do you think are some of the best examples of contemporary, or at least more modern, say 1950 to today, examples of barbershop fragrances that those who are listening could go check out or even purchase?
Well, the thing about barbershop notes in today's world is the very term barbershop has come to mean sort of an anachronism. It's very much when you want to smell barbershop, you want to have that semi-antiquated, old school barber vibe. So if you get it to a point where it's too modern, it ceases to be barbershop, you know, air quotes, in the minds of most people. That's the problem. So you get aquatic, you get ozonic or any other sort of modern abstract, and people start to lose the barbershop connection. However, I think probably at least the most modern you can get, and still people will go, okay, that's barbershop, is probably going to be in the fresh fougere or traditional eau de cologne style, maybe modernized a bit. The thing about it is, and I didn't touch upon the UK very much, but the UK has a very unique twist on barbershop too. They prefer very naked bergamot, like cup of Earl Grey tea. They prefer very naked lavenders. They even use rose, which may be weird. Most people think that rose is not manly, but there are a lot of rose scented products that are very much for men in the UK. A lot of your DR Harris, Penhaligons, GOF Trumper, those kind of traditional 19th century barbershop brands play around with a very stark bare rose in a man's aftershave or whatever, or shaving preparation. And I feel like a lot of the modern barbershops that we see now, the brands that are trying to, I guess, mix a bit of the new with the old, they're leaning more on that British aesthetic. Like Murdoch is a good example. Murdoch's been around since 2010, based out of London. And they kind of do the whole, let's take the British barbershop style with the bergamot and the lavender and throw some ozonic notes and some ambroxan and clean musks in there and make it more of an MFK Creed vibe, but with those traditional notes on top. I've got a couple of their things, and they have one called Avalon that's basically bergamot and lavender and a little bit of orange blossom, but then the base is thoroughly modern. And then they've got one called Black Tea. It's really good. Similar sort of deal. And that's probably the closest thing to modern barbershop that you're going to get, because anything else is going to be trying to, Art of Shaving is a good example. Their products were all very a mishmash of the traditional with the modern. So unfortunately, all their stores closed, so you can only buy their stuff online now. But yeah, that's where I'd go with that. With modern barbershop, it's almost a contradiction in a way to say modern barbershop, but
Right. No, I think you're. Oh, sorry, that is the doorbell. Everyone, I'm here in Taiwan living with my family. We're kind of staying in a big family house, so I apologize, everyone, listeners and viewers, for the chaos in the background.
all sides they won't leave you alone, will they?
And, I was just going to say that I totally agree with you about the kind of throwback aesthetic, and it's a little bit. And I kind of, when I think of barbershop, I today in today's world, I almost think of like, like a hipster thing, like a hipster vibe, right? Like, so I think of some of the niche in America, at least. I think of some of the niche houses, like maybe Rogue Perfumery, like how Manny Cross really loves that kind of contemporary throwback, to bring back those styles, but in a very wearable new way. So I think, some of his fougères, for example, give me a very like barbershop aesthetic. There's House of Mammoth, who the perfumer makes barbershop products, like actually like old fashioned shaving cream, etc. But then also makes fragrance, right? So that is a very literal comeback, or bringing back the idea of in-house, house made barbershop products that you can buy with a fragrance that goes along with it. So I feel like, yeah, there's some interesting kind of, I don't know if hipster is the right word, but some independent artisanal ideas of people who just don't want to be part of that big conglomerate world.
Yeah, and you can almost kind of see the whole barbershop thing cresting and waning with the advent of faster and faster methods of personal grooming. So the thing was, people didn't really go to barbershops on a regular basis anymore with access to wet razors and things like that. But then once the traditional wet razors got replaced with disposable ones, and the shave products got faster and more efficient, so people were no longer whipping up bowls of lather, they were just spraying some goop on their face. The act of shaving itself became less of a pleasurable thing you do as like a zen moment and necessity, but also something you could enjoy. And it became a chore. I got to get through this as quickly as I can. And then electric razors, well, that throws it all out, because now it's just pre-shave stuff on your face, and then you Norelco your face like you're taking a lawnmower across it, or for ladies, up and down the legs and what have you not. And that's it. It's just, okay, this is a chore. I don't really want to be doing this. It's over and done in 5 minutes. There's no pleasure derived here. So why do I need a barbershop product? Why do I need an aftershave? Why do I need anything when I'm just trying to get this out the way? Because life just gets faster, and work and everything. And you don't need me to tell you, you know how it is. It's like you barely have time for yourself anymore with all the commuting and whatnot. So it's like people don't take the time to enjoy grooming. Therefore, the grooming products themselves kind of become more and more niche because less people to enjoy. You go into a grocery store and you see the same, at least in America. I know in Asia it's probably different, but you go into a grocery store and you see the same Brute, same Aquavelva, same Skin Bracer, same Old Spice. That's been there for 50, 60, 70 years. No new products, or something hipster, like you said, will be twice the price, and sitting, a Cremo will be twice the price and sitting next to it. Something like that. But like in terms of the everyday grab stuff, it hasn't changed because there's been no need, because it's just a declining market, and it has been for decades. And it's kind of sad in a way, like I don't even know if, going back to women never really traditionally went to barbershops. They used hairdressers. Guys did too. Guys who kept long hair and wanted to be fancy and wanted the hairstyle, they would go to salons too and hairdressers. And my lady friends out there who love their salon days will tell me that a barber and a hairdresser are not the same. Do not get twisted. That is like calling a Pinto a Ferrari. The Pinto being the barber. the Ferrari being the hairdresser. Do not get them twisted. One is like $12, right? Out the door. The other is like $70. Highlights, perm, hot oil condition. You're there all day talking to your besties while they're working magic on your hair. That's an experience. That's a barber. That's a salon. Not the same. And those products also exist on a different plane. Paul Mitchell, Vidal Sassoon. Again, don't need me to tell you. It's not the same. And there is that bit of gender division there because the men go to the barbershops, get their, what's it? It's, what do they call it? It's shaving a haircut 2 bits, right? Dun, 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 right? They get the shaving haircut 2 bits out the door. Ladies go in there, drop like a half a week's income, and then get the royal spa, treatment. To get the whole 9 yards, and now they're set for for a while. They're probably getting mani-pedi too while they're in there. So it's the full thing.
It's actually a fascinating. Oh, sorry. It's actually a fascinating discussion. What is happening? Did I mess something up? Sorry. The way that those spaces are hair care, body care spaces are gendered, especially in the West and Europe and America in the West. That and how the time and the experience and financially how they're gendered, because there's a lot of assumptions in there. Men are busy, men are important, men are practical, men don't experience pleasure, right, with self-care. Whereas women don't have anything to do, right? Women can just spend a lot of money, right? Women experience a great deal of pleasure, making themselves feel pretty. Those are a big lot of assumptions, which is super interesting, right? Go ahead.
Since I'm the son of a traditional homemaker, my mother, she didn't work here and there, but she was mostly a homemaker because she had me to contend with. And I understand, because when your whole life revolves around pleasing other people and you're not getting paid to do it, you're just doing it because you put a ring on your finger, right? And so it's like they deserve that all day pampering spa treatment. If they have to spend $100 to do it, then guess what? That's the tax the husband has to pay for having someone who doesn't ask questions, for someone who just makes dinner, folds the sheets, takes care of the kids, because that's not easy. So there are assumptions there, but on the other hand, if you put yourself in the shoes of that person, you're like, I'm going to want to drop $100 for an all-day pampering treatment, because it's like you don't get any pleasure any other way. I mean, you're bored. Otherwise, it's daytime TV. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, I couldn't imagine that being my life. If I was someone's stay-at-home husband, for example, if I found a good sugar daddy somewhere, I would go Jack Nicholson mode real fast. I would go stir crazy. I'd be Danny. Danny is all work and no play, like in The Shining. That'd be me, just staring into the camera like this.
I don't know. I bet you'd find something to fulfill your time, some hobby or pursuit or interest or project. But I mean, you're right, though, that those spaces also can be definitely centers of power and community and self-care and rest and relaxation and respite and safety. And that's a really, really good point. Really powerful point, for sure. And it's interesting because I wonder, I feel like the idea that there's this barbershop kind of style of scent and fragrance, is there like a salon scent in fragrance? Are there spa fragrances? I don't know if that exists at the same time. Do you think?
I think so. They're not as common. But a good example of an early one is Calyx by Prescriptives. That was designed to be a fresh day spa kind of scent, and it was very early use of Kalone. Actually, it had a cucumber note, very melony green note, very gorgeous, unisex in my opinion. If you like the idea of going to a day spa and you want to smell like you're got cucumbers on your face and it's just all this wonderful skin mask, Calyx is where it's at. It's no longer Prescriptives now because Estee Lauder retired that name. It's now under Clinique, but the fragrance still exists. Another one, a really, really early one, is Jean Nate by Charles of the Ritz. That was a day
Mm.
spa scent too. And Jean
Yeah.
Nate is very fresh, very green, a little bit of floral, kind of unisex. Again, I think anybody could enjoy Jean Nate. And it was sold as a cologne, a big body splash. There was a bath oil as well. Eventually, once Charles of the Ritz died in the 80s, Revlon picked it up. So today it's under Revlon, but Jean Nate has been around since like the 40s. It's like probably the original spa scent, if I'm quite honest.
Yeah.
Then Clarence had some. Clarence had Dynamist, I think, in a red bottle. Another spa scent. There's a whole line of Clarence spa fragrances actually, and they're all very fresh, very light, transparent. Not meant to be something you would wear out to a dinner, right? But just
Right.
give you that feeling
Yeah.
that you're there.
And now that you're
Gone.
and now that you're mentioning it, I mean, I actually think Clinique, like the whole line, really. I mean, I think that's the idea behind the whole brand. And there are other brands like that. You're right. So yeah, absolutely. There's a whole world of that kind of women's equivalent of that. Now that you're mentioning it, which is, yeah, that's really cool to kind of put it in context with the idea of the world of barbershop, which is really, really interesting. And I apologize, Derek, but I think that I am going to have to cut our talk a little bit short. I'm so sorry. My son is not feeling great. He has a little bit of a stomach ache. I
Okay.
apologize. But let's maybe finish this conversation another time, and we can add on another subject. If you don't mind, that would be great. And real quick, if you could remind people how to find you if they're just listening, and then I'll put that in the notes below.
Okay. Instagram is the Senate Devil. YouTube is Viranis Ridari. We got to put an underscore though because I'm old school. No true spaces. They weren't allowed back in the 90s. You got to use underscores. So Viranis _ Ridari. The underscore sent it _ devil. I got to keep it real. Basenote is Viranis Ridari as well. It's either one or the other. That's kind of my universal across everything. Even things that aren't related to fragrance. If you look up Viranis Ridari, it's likely going to be me 90% of the time. So
excellent. And definitely Derek is one of our big intellectuals here in the community. And please check out all of his work. It's amazing. I learn so much every time we talk, and every time I watch video or read a post. It's tremendous, a tremendous contribution to knowledge and the community and everyone. So thank you so much for your time today. We'll definitely do another one. I apologize for having to go, and we will talk soon. Bye, everybody.